I'm excited today because Keith Burns is going to join us again and talk about freebies for the food plot community. I know freebies make me really happy, and I'll bet they make you happy too. So Keith is going to join us and talk about some really significant freebies for food plot farmers. Keith, thanks for joining us again today. Always love learning from you, but we're getting a little closer. Even wore my green shirt thinking about green cover today because we're February and we've got 20s forecast by Coda where you are here this weekend, and it's dry, but it's not long till we're going to want to start putting some seed in the ground.
Yeah, that's right, Grant. It's always a pleasure to join you. And here in Nebraska, our rye is starting to really start growing and perking up, and it won't be long before we got a lot of growth out there.
You're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects today, and I'll bet a lot of our audience favorite subjects, and that's freebies, free stuff. Who doesn't like free stuff?
Everybody loves free stuff, Grant. And I've had this concept that, as anybody who's making a living off the land, whether you're a farmer, a rancher, or a food plotter, you're using the land to create something of value. And we are so blessed because we have these free things given to us by God, by grace, in order for us to do that. And we just really have to figure out, as stewards of that land, how to take full advantage of it.
Yeah, and I want you to highlight a few of those. And folks, I'm going to say up front, Keith has a brilliant, I've watched it a few times, webinar that goes into more detail. We're going to share links on that. It's on the Green Cover YouTube page, and we'll share a bunch of links to that.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. And I talk about, there's 7 main things that God has given us by grace. And first of all, I want to just, when I say given by grace, in order for something to be given by grace, there's 3 things that have to be true of it. And just, think about it. The biggest thing, of course, is, the gift of his son, Jesus, in our lives. But to be given by grace, it has to be free. It's not something you can buy. It has to be undeserved. It's not something that you can earn. And it has to be something that's unlimited or unrestricted. And, and the grace that you get does not affect my share. We all have equal access to it. And so those 3 things have to be true in order for something to be given truly by grace. And just like God's gift through his son, Jesus, we have these things in agriculture that God has given us by grace. They're free. We don't buy them. They're undeserved. We don't earn them, and they're unrestricted. We're not going to run out. And so that's kind of what the webinar is all about. And I want to just highlight 3 of those here today to really help people understand how blessed and how fortunate we are that God has given us these things. And so the first one is sunlight. It's solar energy. We sometimes take these things for granted, but, we don't have to buy it. We don't really earn it, and we're not going to run out. And the share that you get, Grant, does not take away from mine. So it's truly given by grace. And if we start looking at how powerful that solar energy, that sun is, it shows us that our God is an extravagant giver. I heard another guy talking about this, so I did my own calculations. This is fascinating. If we could capture, and this is for Nebraska, you're further south, a lot of the listeners are further south, so it's going to be even a bigger number for you guys. But if we could capture every photon that the sun is giving us throughout the course of a year, and I could sell it at 10 cents a kilowatt hour, which is what we're paying for electricity, which that's pretty reasonable, the value in a year on 1 acre would be $800,000. That's incredible. That's an incredible number, and it just shows how extravagant the Creator is in giving us these things. And so we don't have to wonder where the energy for our system is coming from. It's from the sun. And so our job is to capture that and to turn it into energy, to turn it into things of value. Now, right above my head here, we've got solar panels on our roof here at Green Cover. We're capturing that sun. We're feeding it through our mixer and through the lights right here. But far better than that is we just plant plants. Green plants are the perfect solar collector. They're very low maintenance. All you got to do is plant seeds. They're going to pop out of the ground. And the sun is going to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. It's going to take water, and it's going to turn it into glucose. And that glucose molecule, that carbon molecule, is the support system for everything that plant does. But that doesn't happen without solar energy. Sunlight that hits bare ground, it's not only wasteful, but it's destructive. We're going to heat up our soil. You've seen this out on, the Ozark Mountains out there.
Yeah.
You guys get hot. And if it's hitting bare ground, that soil temperature, can get 120, 130, 140. Well, you're cooking all the life out of your soil. But if you have it covered, you'll drop that temperature 30 to 40 degrees. And that's because we're capturing the solar energy instead of just letting it cook our ground. As a farmer, as a rancher, as a food plotter, our first goal really should be how much of that solar energy that God is giving us by grace for free, how much of it can we capture? And so, the way we look at it on our farm, and I think the way food plotters should look at it too, is I can't just plant one crop a year. As a corn farmer, I'd plant in May and I would harvest in October and go on vacation the rest of the year. Well, that's not a very efficient system. I'm wasting more than half the sunlight that I'm getting. And it's the same for a food plotter. If you, plant in July and, hunt your deer in October and then you don't worry about it the rest of the year, you're wasting the vast majority of the sunlight that God is sending you. So that's why, with the release process, we encourage, kind of that two-step approach. We have a warm season, cool season approach. And that's not just to feed the deer, which it does, and it helps grow deer. And I think I mentioned this before. I love how your program is called Growing Deer, not Killing Deer. Because if you can grow the deer, well, then, the killing becomes a lot more fun and easy, but you're not going to grow them if you're only planting that for a harvest plot. Just like we're not going to grow our soils here if we're just planting our cash crop. So that's where it's important to keep that plant growing as often as possible. And really, when you do that, we're emulating how God created natural systems to capture as much solar energy as possible. That's kind of the first thing that we look at is how can we capture that sunlight? How can we put that carbon into the soil and let that energy flow throughout the system? And then the second thing I want to talk about is nitrogen. And, nitrogen is a huge expense. The U.S. agriculture industry spends $5 billion a year on nitrogen fertilizer. It's crazy. And we're part of that. Some of that money is what we spend. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this that are buying nitrogen fertilizer for their food plots as well. Because there is no doubt plants have to have nitrogen in order to grow. That's the way God made them. That's a huge part of it. Nitrogen converts to amino acids, which turns into protein, which is needed if we're going to grow deer well. So we have to have nitrogen for the plants. We're not arguing that. But here's the thing. There is 30,000 tons of free nitrogen above every acre of crop ground, every food plot, every farm ground, every ranch ground, 30,000 tons of nitrogen. So can we say nitrogen is given by grace? Well, I didn't pay for that 30,000 tons up there. I'm pretty sure I didn't do anything to deserve it. And at 30,000 tons per acre, we're not going to run out. That's unrestricted. That's unlimited. So yes, it is given by grace. But the problem is that it's held as two nitrogen molecules. Just think of them, they just want to be tied together. So it's N2 dinitrogen. And just like it doesn't do anything when we breathe it in, because it's the atmosphere is 78% nitrogen, we breathe it in, it does nothing to us. The plants can do nothing with that nitrogen in the atmosphere. So that's why we spend $5 billion, because we have to break that nitrogen bond and put it into a form that plants can use. And so when you're buying nitrogen, you're not paying for the nitrogen. That's free. You're paying for the energy that it takes to make it available. But God, again, has given us the system. He put these plants to live in conjunction and harmony with the biology. And the biology is what's making it available. And so rhizobia bacteria, which we're putting on every food plot mix that goes out the door, every farm plot mix that goes out the door, we're putting the bacteria on there that can do the same thing as these $5 billion factories. They break that nitrogen bond and they put it into a form that the plants can use. And that's cool. We call that that's a biological superpower. But as great as that is, those rhizobia bacteria, they can't live on that nitrogen. The plants can, those bacteria can't. So the plant has to trade them or buy that service with the carbon that they're producing through photosynthesis, which only happens if you're capturing the sunlight. So it's all tied together. The more sunlight we can capture, the more carbon we can produce, the more we can feed the biology that's doing all these services for the plant. So when you have an effective, efficient system that includes legumes like soybeans and cowpeas and sun hemp, the rhizobia are making that nitrogen available, which is great, but not everything is a legume. But there are other organisms out there as well, and they're included in the biology that we put on the seed. They're present in native soils. And these things can make nitrogen available to all plants, not just legumes. So things like azospirillum and zotobacter, there's a whole long fancy list, but God has given us all these organisms. Now, they're not as productive as rhizobia, but they're very good at providing nitrogen for the system. And the beautiful thing about food plots, Grant, is that I'm not hauling truckloads of soybeans off
Yes.
as grain. I'm not hauling corn or alfalfa bales. So it's a system that regenerates itself because I can recycle so much. And so I don't have to put 200 units of nitrogen out there to grow 200 bushel corn. I'm just trying to grow a really good food plot, and the biology is perfectly capable of doing that. So once you get your release system and process in place, you should not have to put any nitrogen fertilizer on. And you haven't on your ground, right?
For a decade now. Yes.
Yeah. And so your proving grounds are literally proving the point that I just made there. So, and then the third thing that I want to highlight here, again, there's 7 of these. I would encourage you to check out the full webinar. But the third thing I want to talk about is water, primarily in the form of precipitation. We were just talking, Grant, about how dry it is. There, we're pretty dry up here. It's dry across the big area. And so sometimes you don't think about water as being given by grace. Now, do we pay for it? No, we don't pay for the rain. Do we deserve it? Well, no. God says it rains on the just and the unjust alike. It doesn't have anything to do with that. Is it unlimited? Is it unrestricted? Well, we could probably argue that fact for a long time. But the point is that, when God sends the precipitation, and oftentimes we feel like we don't have very much control over that. I know there's all these theories about cloud seeding and all this, but really when it comes down to it, we don't have a lot of control over the precipitation that we get. The water cycle is big and it's complicated, but there's one part of that water cycle that as a farmer, as a food plotter, we have 100% control over. And if we don't get this part right, it does not matter how much precipitation, how much rain, how much snow you get, because you're going to waste it. And that's the infiltration part. We are completely responsible for how well that moisture that we get, given by grace, undeserved, free, how much of that we can get into our soils. And, a few years ago, I was out there, we did the field day at the proving grounds there, and we did some infiltration tests, and it was stunning, the differences, wasn't it? We did one kind of in the hard packed driveway. We did one where you really hadn't been doing, release processes very long. And then one in the soil where you'd been doing it for quite a few years. The difference is staggering of how fast we could get that water into the soil. And so we should not complain about the lack of precipitation that we're getting until we are absolutely set up to take advantage of every drop that falls. And, like our friend Jimmy Emmons says, and I like to often repeat, when somebody says, how much rain did you get? We really want to say, we got all of it. We got all of it. And the way that we improve that infiltration, the ability to get that water into the soil, number one, we got to keep the ground covered. It boils down to the soil health principles. Got to keep that ground covered, because when a raindrop hits bare soil, it's hitting that at 30 miles an hour. And if you ever have seen that picture of a raindrop hitting bare ground, it looks like a little bomb exploding, because it hits with such impact. There's this miniature explosion, and what that's doing is it's tearing all of the soil particles apart. And the little clay particles, when they get separated from the silt and the sand, then when they settle out, they're just going to seal your soil. And everybody's seen this. It's called crusting. And that's what happens when you don't have that soil protected from the impact of that raindrop. So first of all, we have to keep the soil covered. Secondly, we have to have channels for that moisture to get down into the soil. And those channels are biological. So roots, number one, we got to have roots and that raindrop will follow that root right down into the ground. And then number two, it's earthworms. And I know when I've been to your place and when we could actually get a shovel in the soil around the rocks that you have there, we found lots of worms and activity worms and the burrows of worms. And that's just think it's a whole bunch of little straws and it's just absorbing that water when it falls. I know you said you got a quick inch of rain the other day and you got it all into the soil because you had those channels to get that in. You had that cereal rye growing out there from the fall release. So it's a perfect system for capturing every drop that falls. And that again, that should be our goal. These things are given by grace, free, undeserved, unrestricted, but just like the grace that God gives us through his son Jesus, we have to do something to accept that. We have to do something to grasp it. We have to do something to implement it. So just because sunlight, nitrogen, rainfall, and these other things that you can learn about if you go to watch the whole webinar, they're given to us by grace, but we only can take advantage of them if we implement them. And that's where, the cover cropping, the rotation, the land management comes into play. It's how we integrate these graces, these freebies. I call them bio graces because they're biological and they're given by grace. That's how we incorporate it into our system. And when we do that, we're not only going to grow deer really well, but we're going to grow our soil. And that's really what is growing the deer in the long run.
Keith, that is so, to me, so exciting and actually just so encouraging. And we've seen it here. So I didn't understand all the science behind it. Certainly when we started, we just were trying some new concepts. And, I'd heard someone talk about this or that or saw this while I'm traveling. But when you put it together in such simple form, and I reflect on, and I share this often, okay, depending on who you believe, there was 30 plus minus million bison running around the Great Plains, more woodland bison east of the Mississippi, 60 million total. No one was making nitrogen. No one was putting it out.
Yeah.
No one was tilling. That's not counting all the elk, antelope, deer, 30 million Native Americans all making a living because God provided all these resources. And often in our own lives, we think we can do it better, and it rarely works out when we stray from God's plan. If you just think about that, I think everyone, myself included, can relate where I took some left turns and I shouldn't have, and it didn't work out too good in the long run. And the same is true with our soil and it comes to deer hunting. Yes, you can artificially for a while put a lot of fertilizer out, do a lot of things. Iowa's a great example. Deer hunters love Iowa. But after a while, that system crashes, right? And they tested a couple years ago, 300 farm wells in Iowa. All 300 wells had glyphosate in them. These are deep wells feeding the farmhouse, what people are drinking, right?
Yeah.
There's huge nitrate problems coming out of Iowa. And God's plan is so simple. And our plan to grow deer, the release process, what green cover does, we avoid those things or we keep them down to a reasonable level. And we don't have those issues. So we have a long-term sustainable relationship with the planet. You're growing crops and cattle. I am taking venison off the land. There's a cycle here. And that cycle is based on these free gifts you've just shared about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we really truly are blessed to be, stewards of the land and creating something of value off the land. And if you're growing deer and you're eating them, why wouldn't you want to do it? Number one, as cheaply as possible, but number two, as natural and healthy as possible.
I've never ran this calculation. I should someday, and we're kind of end on this, but I've got friends that, buy land in Iowa or a big ag state, and they harvest big deer, but the input cost per inch of antler, they're paying so much for ag land, more than hill country land like I have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cost per acres more. They've got all these inputs of heavy nitrogen, or they're cash renting a farmer, but they're giving a reduced rate so deer can eat the crops and the farmer taking it off somewhere. And I'm down here in the hills and we're harvesting pretty nice deer on much less cost per acre. I have no nitrogen input costs. I've got seed cost and I plant twice a year. I ought to do sometime a calculation of cost per inch of antler harvested per acre or something like that. And I think that would really unequivocally show the value of good blends planting twice a year, letting these free resources turn into venison and antlers.
Mm-hmm.
That would be an interesting calculation, all by God's grace.
That's right. There's no better economics than free stuff.
Free stuff. Keith, thanks for taking time out of your day, certainly going into planting season. I'm going to share, and I'm going to, I'm catching Keith off guard here. Probably maybe next year. We're super busy. Right now, we're getting all kind of emails asking, Grant, when you got another field day, I want to learn about this. I want to see it in practice. And folks, we're just really busy. We started over, as a lot of people know, 2 or 3 years ago, a new piece of land, and it's really coming around nicely. I'm really excited about it, but we've been hustling. And our soils are taking shape. We could do another infiltration test, Keith, and see if we're making progress. And
Absolutely.
so maybe next year, Keith and I can get together, or some of the Green Cover staff, and have a field day next year, folks. We're going to limit it. We used to have 100 people, maybe down to 50, so we can spend more time one-on-one with people, really talking about their situation, because we know this needs to be tailored site-specific to each food plot farmer.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'd love to be part of that.
Yeah. Keith, again, thanks again. Look forward to updates through the growing season.
Thanks, Grant. Thanks, everybody.
Every time I visit with Keith, I learn more, and I hope you learned more also. But I really want to encourage y'all again to go to that link in the description about the full webinar about these 7 freebies. They have had a huge impact on our ability to have very productive food plots even in tough seasons and produce better deer. Keith referenced this a lot. It's by God's grace that we have free sunshine and all these freebies out there. But even more important than producing a good food plot is accepting His grace for our life here and our life in eternity. And I so encourage each of you all to seek God's will for your life. Accept that free grace, the gift of His Son Jesus, in trade for our salvation. I hope each of y'all truly take time to enjoy creation. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.